Hello, hello. This is Kinesiology 231. We are in Chapter 1, presentation number 4, specifically going over hypercholesterolemia and dyslipidemia. And this can be found, the section can be found on page 14 of the textbook. So when we go ahead and go into this part of the chapter, we have to start thinking in terms of how everything kind of ties together. So I'm going to preface this whole presentation with that. Please just kind of think about how things tie together. So hypercholesterolemia is an elevation of total cholesterol in the blood. Now, hypercholesterolemia can also be referred to as hyperlipidemia. And when you look at an abnormal lipid profile, it's dyslipidemia. So if we go ahead and start kind of dissecting this real quick, I'm going to take a moment here. And you look at hypercholesterolemia and hyperlipidemia, well, like hyperactive, right? Or hyper like hyperventilate. Hyper is an elevated. So if you dissect this and you take that first part of the word, you have hyper, and then cholesterol. Well, hyper, elevated, cholesterol, hyperlipid, elevated lipid or fat. And then when you look at emia is a suffix, and I've cut it and pasted over to the right here for you for your benefit from medicinenet.com. It's specific to the blood. So when you look at for example, hyperlipidemia is a elevated lipid level that's found in the blood, emia. Cholesterolemia, hypercholesterolemia, would be an elevated cholesterol level found in the blood. Conversely, if we said hypo, H-Y-P-O, that would be a lower cholesterol level found in the blood. Got it? So you'll start to notice this verbiage as we get deeper into this class, how it kind of translates out hyperventilate, hypoventilate, hypercholesterolemia, hypocholesterolemia. You know, the verbiage kind of carries across certain disciplines within the human body. So just kind of keep that in mind. But this link out will take you to the article and you can read a little bit more about it. High density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein are the two main types with different types of health concerns associated with each. So cholesterol, well, lipoprotein, if you will, it's a waxy fat-like substance. That's where the lipo comes from. Like when you hear the term liposuction, they're sucking fat, lipids out of the human body. So when you hear cholesterol and lipoprotein, it is a fat-like substance in the protein family. And it's found in all animal proteins, and the body can make cholesterol in the liver, and it's absorbed into the liver from the diet. And cholesterol, it's part of our body, and we need levels of cholesterol to build cell membranes and have sex organs and form bile acid for digestion. This is taken right from the book, by the way. So, they're also part of a transport system within the body, taking lipids from the liver to the body and from the body to the liver for processing. And they're classified by their thickness. And there are four main ones. And the first two we're not too worried about. The two that you'll almost exclusively deal with in this profession are LDL and HDL, low density lipoproteins and high density lipoproteins. And as noted earlier, they're different in terms of their health benefits and also detriment. I mean, when you look at these two lipoproteins. So I broke this out left side, right side for your benefit. And LDL on the left-hand side, that's generally considered the bad guy of lipoproteins, right? It's a larger molecule, and it's also associated with the accumulation of plaque on the interior of the walls of the arteries. And when you look at it, it's made in the liver for transport of triglycerides. Okay, got it. Well, HDL, it's the reverse transport of cholesterol to the liver as opposed to the LDL that takes it from the liver. And LDL is generally considered a good cholesterol because it picks up these cholesterols that are kind of floating around in the bloodstream and transports them back to the liver for processing. And they're smaller in nature and actually suspended in the blood. And like I said, they pick up excess cholesterol from the arterial walls and takes that back to the liver. Now, when you start getting deeper into the industry, and you've seen this kind of evolve over the last few years, we've progressed to where we talk about HDL over total, LDL over total, and even HDL versus LDL as a ratio to determine lipid health. And this is a breakout. I'm sorry this is a little bit smudgy here, and I blew it up before. It looked fine. But I just pulled this right down from a search, and you have total cholesterol, non-HDL, and you have LDL and HDL. So when you look at these, and you look at the levels, notice the higher the HDL, right, the better off you are. The lower the LDL, the better you are. And this gives you a range. So when you start to look at this, you go, okay, if my total cholesterol is 125 to 200, you can go 50 over 125 to 200 and get a ratio. You can do your LDL cholesterol and do that as a ratio over your total cholesterol. So the reason why I put this up was a point of reference so you can have a reference in terms of what are appropriate levels and what are recommended levels for blood cholesterol, but also just to kind of start evaluate this and look at the ratios that you can come up with between these. And with physical activity is kind of a key part to this, right? So physical activity, if you think about it, it makes sense. You're doing large muscle groups continuously for 30 minutes, and you're doing so for 150 minutes a week as per American College of Sports Medicine and American Heart Association guidelines. Okay, so what is that doing? That is increasing your blood flow through the circulatory system over and over and over again, and it's allowing those HDLs to kind of roam around and scoop up cholesterol and take it back to the liver. So it makes sense, right? It's logical that you'd have a benefit by having more HDL in the bloodstream, and it's also logical that cardiovascular activity would help in the process to help circulate the HDLs better, but also help break off some of the gunk that might be on the inside of the arterial walls. So statistically, what they showed in the book was this. You've seen increases of HDL to aerobic activity, and it was related to the training dose. Now, what they found was it was mostly with cardiovascular and not so much with resistance training. And it kind of makes sense based on what was brought up in the previous presentation, where you have strength training is usually some type of event that happens where you're pushing weights around, then you rest, then you push weights around, then you rest, and it's discontinuous. What you're looking for is that more continuous nature of activity to help circulate the blood. And with this kind of habitual, moderate to vigorous physical activity, you have this positive effect on lipid metabolism and also lipid profiles in general. And that's on the HDL side and the LDL side. But you really see the correlation between, at least from what the book states, the increase in HDL is a response to aerobic exercise. So, you need to have that aerobic work in your workouts. You just can't pump out weights all the time. You have to have, for some overall wellness and fitness, some continuous cardio activity about 150 minutes a week to be able to have this response. And if we tie this together, a lot of this will start making sense, right? If you start thinking of the body as a bunch of systems all tied together, and I cut and paste this picture of the heart over so it kind of resonates hopefully with you. And it's a closed system. The heart is the pump. The heart contracts, and every time it contracts, it exerts a force on the inside walls of the vascular system, right? The intima, squish, squish, and that is which one, systolic or diastolic? 3, 2, 1. It's always S over D. The higher number is the systolic. Squish, it's exerting force on the walls. And so it makes sense now if you have this low density lipoprotein, LDL, this waxy gunk on the inside of the arterial wall, every time the heart squeezes, it's a lot like kinking your garden hose when you're spraying water. It doesn't allow as much water to go through, but what happens when you do that, like if you need to spray your garden down, if you occlude or block off the opening to the garden hose because you want to create a fan spray, you've just closed up the opening or reduced the size of the opening. In essence, what you've done is created pressure in the hose so the water squirts further. Now, in a closed system, you don't have anywhere for the water to go, in this case, the blood to go. It increases the pressure. So your systolic number goes what? Up or down? 3, 2, 1. That's right, it goes up. And the plaque itself also, when you look at it, it occludes this blood flow, and it can cause ischemic events or myocardial infarction. That's the MI over here. But the other part of this equation is this. That plaque can also cut loose and find its way into the circulatory system and find its way somewhere else in the body and actually cause a stroke. So LDL, HDL are definitely intimately related. HDL and LDL are related to cardiovascular activity and how they're affected by cardiovascular activity. Further, blood pressure is also related to lipid profile because LDLs like to slap themselves to the inside of the vascular system and occlude blood flow, which causes blood pressure to go up. So, with that said, when you look at lipid profiles and you look at how it ties in together, this first chapter is really kind of a juicy chapter in tying in all this information. And I'm really spending some time going through and dissecting each little section with purpose to kind of tie them all together for your benefit going forward. So I hope this helps in terms of being able to kind of pick out hypercholesterolemia and also LDLs and HDLs. With that, I'm signing off. Have a good one.